Hey, what's up? This is Don, and welcome to another quick tips video for Cinema 4D. And today I would just like to quickly go over the ambient occlusion effect inside of Cinema. And actually, I want to just quickly show you that by default, the way that ambient occlusion operates inside of Cinema is not actually very accurate. Let me try and describe what I'm talking about. If I render this this very basic scene that I've set up for this, it's very basic. We just have a light coming in from the left, and then it's casting the shadow on the opposite side. And I also have ambient occlusion switched on, which is why we get this sort of dark edge where the cube intersects with the ground. And simply put, ambient occlusion happens, this is describing what happens in the real world. It happens when photons of light hit an object. And sometimes where there's an angle, not all of the photons are able to bounce back out, and reflect onto your eyeball. And so it appears as if those areas are darker. And so in 3D applications like Cinema 4D, 3D Max, and all those other programs, we try and recreate the same phenomena. But I've found that by default, a lot of these programs, they don't really do a good job of recreating ambient occlusion realistically as it appears, or as it happens in real life. If we look at this scene, and just sort of try and dissect it a bit, you can see that the ambient occlusion effect, the intensity of it is exactly the same in an area where the light is beaming down directly, compared to this other area which is not being directly illuminated by the same light. However, the AO is exactly the same intensity. Just to illustrate this, I'm going to go to the render settings, and if I go to multi-pass, I can enable ambient occlusion. And if I render this, I'm already in the layer section, and I've selected single pass, so I can look at just the AO pass on its own. And you can see that the intensity is the same where the light is directly illuminating the object, compared to the other side where the light is not. And this is not realistic. What we should be seeing here is a weaker AO effect on this side, because if you have a light hitting in that area, this should not be as pronounced as it is here. But you can't really control that using the default AO effect, this global effect that you apply from here. You just don't have that kind of control. So we have to do this differently, and this is how you do it. If I remove this effect or just disable it, I'm gonna go back to my scene, and we have to build this in a material rather than using the global ambient occlusion effect. So if I just double click to create a new material, I want to go to the diffusion channel, and this is where this whole setup is going to happen. I want to go to texture, and let's create a layer. This is going to make everything black. Let me just apply this into our scene. And so we have to jump in here, and first of all, let's create a color, and by default this is going to be white. Which kind of brings back everything to, let's call it 0, right? A good starting point. Okay, I'm gonna go to shader, effects, and ambient occlusion, and this is the other method of enabling AO in your scene. And if I hit render, you can see that we're getting some ambient occlusion, just like we did with the global effect. Right, this is still inaccurate. We have to make more adjustments. I'm gonna go to shader, and I'm gonna go to effects and lumas. And what the lumas shader does is it's a sort of real-time procedural shader, which works, it kind of works all underneath. You can't see any preview of this happening. But what it does is it generates a map based on whether that part of the object is being illuminated or not. And this is something which happens underneath. Like I said, you won't be able to see a visual representation that makes sense straight away. So let me just set the illumination to 100%. I will set the color to white, and I'm going to go to the 3 specular channels here and just disable all of them. And this is the basic setup for this part. I'm going to go back to the layers, and what I have to do is put this Lumus effect into a gradient map. And the way we're going to do this is using the colorizer. And the reason we do this is to create something that the other layers will understand, in this structure we're creating. And this is going to allow us to basically mask or restrict rather the ambient occlusion effect to certain parts of our scene. So we want to mask ambient occlusion to be more prominent in dark areas. So we have to reverse this gradient. If I right click and invert knots, whatever side you want to isolate or you want to mask, you need to put this on the right side. So if I go back, I can put this below my ambient occlusion effect, and then if I go to this drop down, I want to set the blending mode to be layer mask, and still no visual feedback on this. What you can try, I guess, is if you right click this, you want to go to one of these modes with GI in brackets next to them. I'm going to go to, say, not GI, and this kinda gives you a bit of a preview of what's happening, but it's quite small. I guess you can enlarge it if you right click and open window and stretch this out, and you should be able to see what this diffusion channel is doing to your preview. But this takes a while to render, so it may not be that very useful anyway. But anyway, that's besides the point. If I close this down and render, now you're gonna see that in the dark area the ambient occlusion effect is still just as strong as it was before, but now in an area which is being directly illuminated by a light, it's weaker, and this is how it should be. This is a better representation of what happens in real life when you get ambient occlusion. And I guess this is something you're not going to be thinking too much about in cinema, especially if you're doing, if you're just using cinema for motion graphics. But when you do things like interior renders or architectural, exteriors and stuff, setting up your ambient occlusion this way is going to produce more realistic results, and that can make your renders more convincing. But it's just something to think about. One question which might be in your head right now is, if you have multiple textures in your scene, do you then have to go into every single texture and basically repeat this whole process? And the answer is no, you don't have to. What you can do is create a preset that you can reuse over and over. So let me call this something like physical AO or something, or realistic AO, whatever you want to call it. What I'm going to do, I'm going to copy this channel in the diffusion. I'm going to disable color and specular, and I'm going to go to the alpha, and under texture I want to paste this, and I want to invert and then untick image alpha, and it's going to look like this. And what this allows me to do now is to use this as an overlay texture. So if I create another texture here, let's maybe make it blue, and let's drop it onto the floor and the cube. as long as our physical AO texture operates last, it's going to give you that ambient occlusion effect. And this is how you would go about applying this in a scene which has multiple textures. Just carry on as if you were creating your scene normally, and then when you're finished, you can then just apply this other texture on top to get your physical ambient occlusion effect across the map. Now, another thing to note is that if you had planned on rendering an ambient occlusion pass, you're no longer going to be using the ambient occlusion multipass over here. You have to go to multipass and then choose material diffusion, because this is where the ambient occlusion effect is coming from. So if I hit render, I can go to my single pass, and then I can just look at the material diffusion. The only thing here is that it will be inverted, and this is to do with the way that the alpha channel is operating in this scene. So you would get this and basically just flip it, invert the channels in After Effects. So this would be all white, and then these areas would be black, and there you would have it. So that's it. I hope you found that helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.